Welcome to Odd Talk, a podcast from Open Door Baptist Church recorded in Prattville, Alabama. Hosted by Danny, the associate pastor at Open Door, Odd Talk is a program which discusses the Bible from its creator to creation and everything in between. Many episodes are interviews with people who attend Open Door Baptist Church on various topics, but all episodes will edify and equip you to live your faith actively within your community. Let's tune in to see what the discussion is about today.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Odd Talk, and I am your host, Danny, associate pastor here at Open Door Baptist Church, and I think this is probably episode 11. And today I have a brother from another mother. This is one of my mentors when I first got saved. He was a very influential individual in my growth, my development spiritually. And so I'm just glad to have Matthew Swofford with us today. And so, Matt, I'm just glad you're with us.
Glad to be here.
As we get into this episode, we're going to be talking a little bit about David and Moses. The thing I love about you, well, there's a couple of things I like about you, but the one thing that I love about you is you don't shy away from like obscure verses or like not really debatable issues, but like Nephilim. Things like that, right. Tower of Babel, Nimrod, some of these passages and these stories in the Bible that are intriguing in that we take a very, not really a unique view to it, but like with the Nephilim, we believe that they're fallen angels with, human women. And then we could talk about Nimrod. We could talk about cloning back then and just different things, tying a little bit of Book of Enoch into the possible Tower of Babel time frame. So that's one thing I love about you. And so you've done a lot of study with David and Moses. It seemed like you really resonate with the life of David. Yes. I know you talk a lot about David. You did a lesson as far as the Garden of Eden, which was really good a while back. You talked a bit about Moses, so I wanted to have you on and talk about David and Moses, their life, biblical principles that we can go ahead and glean from and apply to our lives. But before we get into all that, could you share a little bit about who is Matt Swofford and what is your favorite cartoon?
My favorite cartoon is so we're going to start with that, huh? Is this thing on?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, yeah, we'll start with that. Okay, so my favorite cartoon. This is embarrassing, but it's true. The Masters of the Universe.
He-Man, huh?
Man, I have the power. Yeah,
he had that bowl cut haircut, didn't he?
He had a ridiculous bowl haircut. Yeah, he did, and he ran around in his underwear. Bunch of some furry underwear. Yeah, he held a sword over his head, and he talked like a girl when he was Prince Adam. You know, it was just you think back to things that you were interested in as a kid, and you look at it through adult eyes, and it's like, oh boy.
Didn't he have a cool cat though?
Yeah, battle cat. Yeah, green cat with a saddle on him. That's what you need, Pastor Danny. Is a cat with a saddle.
I don't know. I think a saddle would break Nico's back.
Yeah, probably so. Oh yeah, but yeah, my favorite cartoon. Yeah, that's a good one. Oh man, memories. Yeah, well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I do like to get in the weeds a little bit, not too much. You know, there's a lot of you and I have mutual friends who can get a lot deeper in the weeds than we like to get. But I do find the Scripture so intriguing, and I do like to get beyond the surface level because the Bible's a complex book, a supernatural book, and if we take a moment to kind of peel back some of the layers, we start to understand it more. And really can appreciate it more and see how God really speaks to us through it in a really great way. But as you said, my name is Matt Swofford, and I'm 52 years old. Like long walks on the beach. You know? Just kidding.
He is married.
I am married to a wonderful woman. Yes, I am. So I have two daughters, Taylor and Lauren, and Taylor's married and to a wonderful husband, and I am a newly minted grandfather to Harper, and very proud of that.
She's so cute.
She is cute. She's a good baby, you know. I hate to brag, but no, I don't. I don't hate to brag. She's a good kid. Yeah. And then Lauren, who's our youngest daughter, is in college right now, trying to get a nursing degree, so that's hard fought. Pray for her, pray for both my kids and my family. So, So I'm a PK. I'm a pastor's kid. My dad was in ministry for about 50 years in an independent Baptist church. I grew up very conservative, and in terms of church, and it was a small church, probably at its peak was probably around 75, 80 members, maybe a little more. And I've learned, Open Door is an independent Baptist church, but I like the balance of it here. We really do a good job, I think, of balancing it out. Where I think there were some things in the fundamental Baptist church movement. Sometimes, man, they take it to a whole new level and
legalism.
Legalism extreme, right? Whereas we have to take a much more we have to take a smarter approach to God's word than that, and apply it accordingly. But honestly, I have a pretty boring testimony because I was raised in a good home. I had good parents for the most part. We'll get into this a little bit later, I think, in some of our talk. But when we talk about some of the Bible men that I love to talk about the most, but with the pastors in general, it's hard on the kids a lot of times. And so I'd say the biggest struggle growing up is having a dad who was a pastor who had to pour so much of himself into other people and into the church that, there was a lot of times he didn't have as much to pour into us, because back then, we're talking about the 70s and 80s. And of course, my dad was I was born when he was in his late 40s, so
right, yeah.
So I have my dad came from a much different generation where the expectations of a church pastor were much different than they are now, and so it's it was tough at times because he was away, visiting people in the hospital or counseling people and doing other things when a lot of times we were at home. But it was a good life, and so I went to high school. I didn't accomplish a whole lot there. You're looking at a D- average when I graduated, but hey, I got out of there, right?
I mean, that's the thing about high school. It's just all about getting out of it, right? Getting
out of there, yeah. And college was just not in my future, so I was in the Marine Corps Reserve for about 4 years, and but the biggest thing with that is I had sort of lived in a very sheltered, so to speak, bubble. Not too sheltered. I mean, but I'd never been away from home much, and so once I got into the Marine Corps and was doing some, getting some training there, I really got away from the Lord because just being around, when you work that hard and they're push through that kind of stress and those kinds of things, the way that they typically cope is the coping mechanism is you go out there for, weeks at a time and you work and you train. And then just as hard as you train, you go out there and party and blow off some steam. And so for me, I didn't get too deep into the party scene, but I definitely got out of church, got away from the Lord. And, like a lot of people in their young years, started asking myself, why am I so involved with my dad's faith? I had a little bit of a crisis of faith, I guess, when I was away from him or away from family. And, you start asking questions when you get away, and they're good. It's good questions to ask, honestly. All young adults should ask themselves, why do I believe what I believe? And that's one of the reasons why I appreciate your ministry at the church and your view of apologetics, because I did reach a point in my life where I had to come to terms with what is it about the Bible, my particular faith? Why am I Baptist? There's other denominations. Why am I a Baptist? Why am I all these things? And so that's the first time I really started questioning things, and then, you get distracted by things. Actually, a lot of folks in the church don't know, so this is to my shame, but I married my high school sweetheart at the time, and basically drove that marriage into the ground before it reached the 2-year mark. And all that happened whenever, during the time I was getting my Marine Corps training. And it was, my hubris, a lot of it, and then being away from the Lord, not living to the biblical standard of what a husband should be. And she had her issues too, but anyway, under those circumstances, that relationship did not survive. And the Lord took. What's interesting is during the time I was away from the Lord's whenever I met Michelle, and she only knew church from attending occasionally with her grandfather at the local Methodist church. That was really her only exposure. She really had no interest in church, and we were hanging around the same group of folks, and not really living the way we should be. And anyway, ended up falling in love with her, and we got married after a short courtship, I guess. And everybody was so afraid I was on the rebound during that time. And my dad was just a really great anchor for me at that time, because he was constantly challenging me. And he would say things like, son, you really need to try to get back in church and get reacquainted with the Lord and get back into the Bible, because you're kind of all over the place. And he was right. I was all over the place. And so I'd say, yeah, okay, Dad, sure, and then I don't know what it was. So Michelle and I ended up getting married, like I said, and just really early, the conviction of the Holy Spirit, that's the only thing I can call it, is it really weighed heavy on me, because I started going back to those questions of reflection of why do I believe, and then God really at that time just revealed some things, like the thing that I just couldn't get around is just how when you actually sit down and take the time to read the Bible, especially when you read the words of Christ and things like that, man, the truth was so deep. It just cuts to the soul. And I just kept coming back to that. So I knew in my heart that the Lord was really reaching out to me. And then I would look at my relationship with Michelle and think, man, she deserves so much better than how our current relationship is, because newly married people, they're figuring stuff out. And even though I was a young adult, I had a lot left to learn. And anyway, so I ended up, my dad was very constant at, when he would pick and choose. He didn't beat me over the head with the Bible or anything, but he did constantly, bring that to my mind. Hey, you really need to get back in church, and you need to become the father that you should, the husband that you should be. And my biggest fear that held me back for the longest time was this Michelle just didn't care about church. And I thought, man, here I am, been living however, being the, not necessarily immoral, but like not living the life that I should. And now all of a sudden I'm just going to wake up one day and be like, hey, let's go to church, and
yeah, I imagine that's a big change.
It's a big change. And I didn't know how to tell her like why or any of those things, but anyway, so so I remember again one of the times when my dad was like, hey, why don't you just come on, start coming on back to church, and let's get re-involved, or just get reacquainted with the people there. And so I told him, I was like, Dad, I don't even know where to start. Like, I hear you, I want to do it, I feel the Lord really tugging at my heart, but here I'm married, and trying to get my wife into church is just going to be difficult. And he gave me some good advice, and I've told this to a few people, especially I've shared it with people who do have spouses that don't attend. He said, look, he gave me some great advice, and I would advise anyone to do this. He said, look, just tell her that you want to go to church, you feel compelled to go, you want to be a better husband to her, you want to be a better man, and you feel like the best way to do that is to get back involved in church and start trying to do things God's way. And he says, and invite her. He says, don't belittle her, don't put any pressure on her. He said, simply let her know that this is what you would like to do, and that you would like her to join you, and leave it at that. And he says, if she doesn't go, that's fine. You go, and then the following Sunday, you do the same thing. You invite her to go, and don't pressure her, don't belittle her. Just say, hey, okay, well, I'm going to go. Wish you could go with me. So I did that. I really don't know what Michelle was thinking. That'd be a great question for her. But I remember getting up that first Sunday, and then saying, hey, I think I'm going to go to church today. And then, of course, she's like, well, why? And I was like, I feel like I want to be better. I want to do better. I want to be better for my sake, for your sake. And I said, I know that the biblical way works when I see it in other men's lives, and I want to go and try to get myself straightened out. And she was just like, okay. I mean, she wasn't upset or anything. She was just like, okay, fine. Mm-hmm. And I said, I'd like you to go. I'm good, So she passed, and I had no idea how long this was going to take. In fact, I anticipated, I tried to calculate in my head, boy, how long is this going to go on? Believe it or not, I think it was the third Sunday, because it was 2 Sundays in a row. She's like, no, not really. And I think Michelle, in some ways at that time, was afraid of, church. You get a bunch of people who are buttoned all the way up to the top button, who are who are judgmental and all this other kind of stuff. Mm. But anyway, so that third Sunday, I was like, hey, I'm going back to church. And of course, my dad was the pastor at the church I was going to, so that helped.
Yeah.
So she was like, okay, I get it. Your dad's a church pastor. But that third Sunday, I was like, yeah, I'm going to church this morning. And, if you feel like going, it'd be great for you to go, And what's funny is I remember saying it kind of flippantly, like expecting the no.
Oh, okay.
So, and she was like, I think I might go with you today. Uh-huh. And I was just like floored because I was expecting many more no's before I got a yes. Yeah. But then, so she started going, and she enjoyed it. She saw, the people just loved on her, and just it's just a bunch of good old simple people. That church was it was a small country church, and it did a lot, for her. And then that sort of led into, conversations where Michelle was curious, and that was that was the next big challenge. Is Michelle was not a believer at the time; she was just someone simply attending church, and she enjoyed it. She saw the benefit of a community of people, and that sort of thing. But at that time, she did not see salvation for what it was, or so many people go to church and they get this idea about being a good person and all that. But I'll never forget. So I don't really know how long we'd been going to church together. It wasn't a super long time, maybe 5 or 6 months. And she would probably remember this better than me. But we were living in a single wide trailer out in Deatsville, and broke as broke can be. And we'd finished dinner one night, and I don't know how. I'm pretty sure I'm right about this, but we were playing Nintendo.
That dates you.
yeah, and I don't mean like Super Nintendo. I mean Nintendo.
The 8-bit Nintendo. Yeah.
But to be fair, even at that time, it was old. So this would have been around we were married in 95, so. This was probably around, I don't know, maybe 96 or 97. Mm-hmm. It was a pretty old system by then, but when you have two broke people and the limited entertainment options, I did have an old Nintendo. But somehow while we were playing, somehow our conversation got on we got to talking about her grandfather who had passed away several years earlier. And again, I don't want to tell too much of Michelle's story because maybe she can come on here and tell it some, but Michelle was raised by a single mother and had a pretty, a much different upbringing than I did. We were complete opposites. I came from a pretty well grounded home, and Michelle's, Margaret, my mother-in-law, really did a good job overall of making sure Michelle had everything that she needed. But it was tough, and so anyway, Michelle's grandfather was one of those anchors in her life as a male figure. It was the one male figure in her life who was grounded, because her dad wasn't around, and that's another whole long story. But anyway, so he meant a lot to her, a great deal. And then she got to talking about how she felt when he passed away, and but he was involved in the local Methodist church, and they attended regularly, and I believe he was saved. And so I said, I don't know. I mean, again, this is one of them Holy Spirit things where I was just sitting there and I was like, you could see him again. And she was like, well, wait, what did you say? I said, you could see him again. And that prompted an entire conversation about what salvation was and how you get it. And so we talked, and then, I was trying to be, and what's funny is I was still so far from where I needed to be in my faith, but yet I recalled what I needed the information I needed to pass in order to tell her how to be saved. And I don't even know where it came from, honestly, but like, I just kind of walked her through it. And that conversation changed the course of our marriage. And at that point, then, once she got saved, and then she was baptized at our home church. I'm pretty sure my dad baptized her, which is a special thing because my dad sort of became her dad, And he ended up passing away in '98, so he passed away only about 2 years after we got married, and it was that was hard on both of us really, because he was such a key figure in me getting back connected to the Lord in a way that I needed to because of his challenge. He gave me the man challenge. It was just like man to man. You need to do what's right. You need to be the man God called you to be, and so this part of the conversation is going to tie into a lot of what we'll be talking about later. Mm-hmm. But so we got more involved in church and started serving there, and then after he passed away, the church never really recovered from it. He had been there for 25 years as the lead pastor, and there was a younger guy that came along that I thought would do a great job. Honestly, he and his wife were friends of ours, and the members of the church, they had a group of deacons there that just had their mindset on a certain way of leadership, and they were unwilling to let this young man lead in his own way. They were used to it being a certain way, and so he ended up leaving about a year after being called, and then the church ended up going through a second pastor. So by the time they went through the second, because I really liked the second pastor too. He was a good guy. He's with the Lord now, but Michelle and I just got very disheartened at that point, and was like, we gotta get out of here. This place is dying. Because if you've never been in a church that had an us four and no more mentality, that's kind of where the church was at. At least this is clearly my opinion, but that's sort of where they were. And Michelle and I had gotten into where we were really pretty vested in the church at that time, because we'd come a long way, and we were serving, and I was finally starting to get grounded in the Word a little more, and I was just like, man, this is, and Taylor was born at this point too. Taylor was a baby, and so we were new parents, and I was like, is this the place? Do I want to try to, raise my young family in a dying church? What's funny is we were living at this time in our life. We had moved out of the trailer and gotten a small house here in town in Prattville, and we kept getting these invites in the mail from Open Door Baptist Church. They were sending out these little mailers every once in a while, and so we would get these little mail outs, and so whenever it came time to make a decision on what we were going to do, I told Michelle, I was like, look, let's just go, let's visit this church on a couple of Wednesday nights or something, and see how they are, and maybe the Lord's calling us somewhere else. So we actually attended a couple of services on Wednesday night here at Open Door, and we loved it. We at the time, Pastor David Dersh was here, and he also ended up being a really great mentor for Michelle and myself. He and his wife Marcia, and we love them to this day. They're good folks. But I ended up just meeting with the deacon. So by the way, I was on the deacon board at our home church there, and so they called a deacons meeting, and I was like, now's as good a time as any to drop the bomb, because I was just like, my first inclination was just stop going. But we had a lot of people there that I respected, even though I disagreed with them, and so I said, I'm just gonna drop the bomb on them tonight, and I did. I was like, well, guys, as we're wrapping up, I'm just letting you guys know I'm leaving the church and my family, and they were like, what? They were surprised, and so I just told them that Lord was really felt us being called to ministry at Open Door, and so we left there and started coming here, and since we were already involved at the old church, I was like, we need to get involved here. So after we had attended a few Sundays and I was comfortable with the doctrinal standing of the church and other things, I was like, we need to get involved. So we did. And the rest is history. That was a long time ago. That would have been probably around 2003 or something like that.
So what did you get involved with doing here at the church when you first came, you and Michelle?
One of the first things was really just getting involved with, we just started attending the events, first of all. I highly recommend doing that. It's really easy to get in your bubble, but whenever, I'm telling you, being able to learn more about the people in your church family, one of the things that I enjoy, side note here, I enjoyed about our men's retreat this year is I got to know a couple of the guys that I really have not had a chance to get to know very well during our service time here. And so that allowed me to do that. But anyway, just the events, just being, attending the events, and never underestimate the power of just your attendance, period. Just your attendance in general is an encouragement to other people. And I know as a pastor's kid, knowing how it made my dad feel when people wouldn't come to a service after he had prepared very hard for a message, your attendance is such an encouragement to people. So I highly, recommend, coming to the services, because it really is an encouragement to others. And there's been times where I have come to church feeling like garbage, emotionally, not physically necessarily, but just emotionally, only to get a real charge of just friendship, or just a comment, or an encouragement from somebody who didn't even know they were encouraging me, but they did, so that's important. But as Taylor got older, we became I was the Awana commander for the Awana program for several years. We helped with, actually the very first thing we did with Open Door is we actually helped with the youth. Now, we were not,
Okay.
we didn't teach the youth, we didn't do any of that, but Russ and Leanna Holcomb were the original, or at least during the time we were here, they were the youth pastor. Russ was the youth pastor here, which, by the way, keep him in your prayers. He's battling cancer right now, and man, he and his family can really use prayer. He's still a young guy, and he's been just a great soldier for the Lord, and they're going through a lot right now. So pray for them. But they were over the youth here, and we got to be really good friends with them, and so we enjoyed just hanging out with them, and getting in there and sort of helping around with the youth, and but then so then it kind of morphed from that to doing the Awana program, and I did a little bit of teaching back then, which David Durst is trying his best to make a teacher out of me. It didn't work. Sorry, David. But my ADD's too crazy. I have a hard time staying on talking points. But but anyway, it was good. And then later on, they asked us to be one of the church officers. Be the church treasurer and all that. And but it was good. It was a good time. But anyway, that's the long version, right?
Well, I appreciate that. So those that come here at Open Door, they probably learned a little more about you that they didn't know before. So one thing you didn't mention that I was waiting on you to mention is, what do you do?
What do I do for a living?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm self-employed. I have a window and door company here in Prattville, and that was a real blessing. That's another whole story. How God provided for that, because that is, every time Michelle and I look back at how the Lord gave us stewardship of that company is just nothing short of miraculous. And but I'm in the window and door business. I've been in that business since really I went to work there originally probably around 92, and so I've got some time and grade there. And I started out as the low man, doing cleanup, and delivery stuff, and pretty much held every position that the company had to offer. And then in 2015, the Lord allowed us to become owners of that business, and I brought Michelle. Michelle had a long career in corporate human resources, or also in staffing. She worked for a staffing company for many years, and whenever I bought the company, she had zero knowledge of that business, windows and doors. But I'm telling you, God really gifted me with a wonderful wife who has a sharp intellect and an ability to organize and get things done. And as soon as I knew that this was going to be the path, I was like, I'm going to need a partner. And God gave me a good partner in life, and I was like, you know what, this same partner is going to be a great business partner. And so we went into this endeavor together, and we had to figure some things out. Both of us have a tendency to be type A, and our office staff, boy, they had to put up with some stuff in that first year. We had to put down some ground rules and some boundaries, because when mommy and daddy are fighting, it's not good for the children. Sometimes that happens. But no, it took some time. But once we figured it out, we got the dynamic figured out, it was good. And so that's what I do.
So if anybody in the River Region area and Montgomery, Wetumpka, Millbrook, Prattville, surrounding areas need help with windows and doors, go check out Matt Michelle at Weather Seal Window and Doors. Windows and Doors.
Thank you for that free plug.
Of course. I don't know how much business it'll get you guys, but hey, you guys got your hands full with business right now.
Yeah, God has been good. I'm going to tell you, the last few years, when so many other businesses have worried about things, and I mean, I won't lie, I've worried about it, but God always sends us business when we need it, and in fact, if anything, we've been blessed to stay as busy as we are. I mean, we have opportunities for business growth, but my business model is much different than most everybody else's. Everybody else wants to be in it for the big money grab, and for me, I'm content. I mean, like if Weatherseal never grows any bigger than it is, I'm content. If it shrinks, I'm content. I'll just try to be content with it. I'm too old to worry about that stuff.
No, I hear you. So we are going to jump into the interview now. Okay. And so we're going to jump in. We're going to be, like I had said before at the beginning, talking about the life of David and Moses and things we can glean from their lives. So we're going to talk about David first.
Okay.
What draws you to out of all the men in the Bible, seems like you resonate a lot with David. What draws you to the life of David?
So David definitely was a man that he truly loved God, like with all of his heart, and he's called a man after God's own heart. But his faith was remarkable and noteworthy because, like us today, a lot of people don't realize this, but God never audibly spoke directly to David, like he did to Joshua and the leaders of Israel that came before. The Lord spoke to David through prophets like Samuel and Nathan, and so it's hard to understand that, which gives you some insight on how strong David's faith was, because God did not audibly speak to him. He witnessed God's power. He felt God's power at times, but his faith was very strong, even though he didn't have any. It's not like God just appeared in a cloud, or if you think about even Moses, who we'll talk about in a little bit, or Joshua, even Abraham. There were so many of the early leaders of Israel that had some manifestation of God that they could see, they could physically see, and David did not have that. He was, he was somebody who's brought up in faith, and he just believed, and God would just empower him and work through him, or David would accomplish great things just simply going, you know what, let's just get it done. God's with us. Let's go. And he would do it. And so there's a big, so I appreciate that example of David's faith. And like I said, we can elaborate more on that. But to me, the other thing too is, if I'm being honest, you cannot be a red-blooded male, alpha male, without appreciating David's manliness. Like he is the picture of masculinity in the Bible. At a time when we see, we see a lot of soft men in our world today. I appreciate that, the grit and that manliness that David provides, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And I didn't think about the part where you said in the beginning where, like Moses and Abraham and some of these others, they had like a manifestation, or an experience with God. And David didn't have that. He just lived a life of faith, similar to what you and I would live today without having a manifestation of God, the Shekinah glory, things of that nature. So I appreciated that. And yeah, in our culture today, a lot of people, well, I think it's getting less known or thought of like this now, but in the past, people would think of Christian men as feminine, and weak and things like this. But I think that stigma is going away. But yes, David was one of those, manly men. And
well, one of the things that I like about David too is he wasn't just masculine, but David, everywhere he went, he was the most dangerous man in the room. Yeah, he was. God gave him the ability not only to lead, but he was a remarkable warrior. And the other thing too is that I appreciate about him is his men were so loyal. Like, he was such a good leader that think about Uriah, which, again, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but like, David's like, I want you to go here or go there or whatever. But his love and his loyalty to David as a leader, and you look at his men and how they how they lead, man, they stuck with him as the mighty men and all that, man. They loved David, and like whenever David was with them, they were so fired up. They would just do, they would accomplish some really amazing things. We'll get into this too a little bit more, but we'll see that the one downside I would say to David, which is, we look at David, and my only main critique about him, besides a couple of the things that he did, was he was not a great father. We see this a lot in the Bible. We see it a lot in modern day now, where a lot of times men who serve God, I don't want to rabbit trail too much, but Eli and Samuel were also great men, but they were terrible fathers. And anyway, just that's one thing that David really struggled with, is he was great at accomplishing things for the Lord, but not so great at being a dad. But he really was a great leader, though, and just the example of faith that he provides. Like I say, when you think about all he did for the Lord and yet never heard audibly from the Lord at all, is pretty, like I say, that's telling of how strong his faith really was.
Definitely. Now, what about Moses? What draws you to the life of Moses?
So Moses, it's similar but different. With Moses, I think this is hilarious, but Moses wanted to be an avenger of God for the Hebrew people. According to Acts 7:25, Paul tells us that Moses thought that the people would understood his murder of the Egyptian taskmaster, and that they would see him as a hero. But instead of becoming an undercover hero prince to the Hebrews, he became a criminal outlaw to the most powerful nation in the world at the time. But and he was mostly rejected. Like the people saw Moses as a house mouse, as we would call it in the military. That's just where he. I remember whenever I was in the Marine Corps, we had what was called the house mouse. He was the guy that reported to our platoon sergeant or our platoon commander, and I mean he just was like an admin type person. And this is in boot camp whenever we were in Parris Island, and this guy he got the best treatment. Like he didn't have to do a lot of the same stuff that we did, so everybody hated this dude, man. And really it was an elevated position, but they all thought of Moses as like, this guy, he's living in the palace, he's one of us, but he's in there, he's having steak dinners at night while we're up, down there eating potatoes but yeah, Moses, he was just really rejected from the people. And I mean, I'm sure there's a lot more backstory there. The Bible didn't give us all the gritty details. But so with Moses, what's fascinating is he started out, really rocky. He did want to save the Hebrew people, and he rejected his adoption by the Egyptian family, and then and really was compelled to save his people. But he also, after becoming an outlaw and being rejected by the people and having to go on the run, one of the things that I think intrigues me about Moses is people have different things that they say about, when Moses tells God he's slow of speech and all this other kind of stuff, and they want to say he had a speech impediment. I don't believe that's true. If you read everything that the Bible has to say about Moses, what you find out is that he suffered from crippling anxiety that made him unable to speak publicly. Moses was, and this is according, Paul tells us this in Acts 7:22, but he was highly educated, and according to Acts 7:22, Moses received the highest education offered by the most powerful royal family of the day, and Paul says that he was well spoken, or that he, so in other words, he knew how to speak. He knew what to say. He was just afraid to say it. And what would happen is he would just get the worst case stage fright. And especially in the context when God's like, Moses was really more of an introvert type person. And so when God was like, hey, I'm going to need you to go and stand before the king of Egypt and ask for him to let my people go, he about had a heart attack. And it wasn't that he didn't know what to say. He just the anxiety was it was crushing. And so he just didn't want to do it. But he knew what to say. And the other way we know that it wasn't a speech impediment is we know that later in his life he became quite a powerful speaker, and then he became completely unafraid, because the more that the Lord did, the more Moses got really bold. And of all of the leaders of Israel, or the Hebrews, Moses is the most noted. Like, he's the one that gets referred to. He's the only leader that's ever compared to Jesus Christ, in terms of that. And this is basically something that Paul says. But yeah, but something cool about Moses too that I love is that Deuteronomy 34:7 tells us that when he died, he was 120 years old, and says the Bible tells us he was mentally sharp and still full of vigor. He never lost a step. At 120 years old, he was still a man's man. Yeah. And so that's I love that. Like, all the stuff that Moses went through, God kept him 100.
Amen. Definitely.
Kept him 100%, so he could still, what's that saying for that? Just for men, hair gel. It's being old enough to know what to do and young enough to get it done, or something like that. I forget.
I have no idea. I don't use Just for Men hair stuff.
You don't? No. Oh man, but that white in your beard and your hair, you could use some, buddy.
This is all natural.
Yeah. I'm telling you, I knew that I was really starting to decline when I started to get villain hair.
Villain hair.
Villain hair. Every classic villain, like for the Ninja Turtles, they always have the white streaks down the sides of their head. I started getting that a few years ago, and started turning into what every supervillain that I ever saw in a comic book of when I was a kid. The white streaks down the sides. I have way more than that now, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm trying to find any dark hair on your head. No, I'm just kidding.
There's not many. It was always sort of a sandy blonde, very light brown, and then which is honestly kind of goes in my favor, because the darker your hair, the more the white shows up. So.
There we go, just like me.
You're seasoned with salt and pepper, my friend.
I am. I'm more salt than pepper nowadays. But,
yeah.
All right, so we understand really what makes you resonate with those individuals. Now, one of the things about David that most people understand, and books have been written about it, is the fact in Acts chapter number 13, I believe it is, verse 22, it says that I have found David, the son of Jesse, a man after mine own heart. And so why do you think God calls David a man after his own heart? What can we know about that?
That's a great question. And so for me, after doing a study on David, I'm actually rereading 1st and 2nd Samuel, or really I'm in 1 Samuel again right now. Just honestly, because the way I study the Bible is I like to do it. I just started at the front, started reading through and trying to read things in context. And I mean, they're not all in chronological order, but so David's still pretty fresh on my mind. But so one of the things that I discovered about David, just as I guess a character attribute about him that is very similar to the Lord, is David cares or cared deeply for others besides himself. So David cared a lot for those who depended on him, such as his family, his friends, and his men. If you look at his, David, when David would always get the most angry, it was always over injustice of others. If you look at that, so he put others before himself. In most cases, I mean, obviously there's some exceptions, but generally speaking, David cared about the people of Israel. he cared about justice. He had a very strong sense of justice. And I mean, even though he was in sin at the time, but you remember when Nathan brought the story about about the sheep and the man and all that, David got furious. He was angry about that, and he was like, "Let's go. I want this guy," And he had a very strong sense of justice, and that's true. I mean, like, think about how he felt when he walked out on the field with the men to fight Goliath, and he found it indignant, and he was insulted that Goliath would mock the people of Israel and mock God, and to the point where he was like, this man will not stand. So I think it's that he put other people first. He had a strong sense of justice. He aligned very well with how God sees things a lot of times in terms of justice. There were times David was merciful as well. We see that especially with Saul. I mean, there's times that David really could have took Saul if he wanted to. David was so convinced that because Saul was the original pick for king, that it was his job to, even though God gave him the thumbs up, to be chosen as the next king, David still wanted to honor Saul because he was the original choice. And not that he definitely was not God's original choice. He was basically a pacifier for the children of Israel who were whining about a king, and so God gave them what they asked for, and then it went down exactly like God told them that it would. But yeah. So yeah, for David, I really think it was that his character, he had very similarities to how God is in terms of how he viewed things.
Which speaks volumes, because as a man in the Bible that is really seen as very manly and conquering and leading and not being afraid, to know that there's this Christian leader, David, being said that he's a man after God's own heart. And a lot of times people think of something like that as being effeminate. And so I like that the Bible uses it, because if we're about God, if we're about God's business, if we're about the heart of God, it doesn't mean that we're weak or that we're feminine. It means that we have our priorities right. We're here to go ahead and serve Christ, serve the King. And so I love that it speaks of that to one of Israel's greatest, commanders, generals, if you will. So out of David's life, what do you think is really the pinnacle of his life? What is the highest point David had ever received in his life?
Yeah. So in David's life, I would say, I mean, this is kind of, this is going to seem like a cop-out, but it's not, especially whenever you analyze it for what it is. But whenever he encountered Goliath, I really think that was the pinnacle, just because his faith was never stronger. Like you can read through the scriptures of David, and he still had really great feats that he accomplished, but there's none greater in terms of the odds. What did David have to lose? What was his opponent like? Size wise, or when you look at that entire situation where he had everything to lose, and he was outgunned, if you will. He was going against an impossible enemy, yet he was almost completely without fear. Because we find that David, later in his life as he got older, he actually had quite a bit of fear. Now, God's got a lot done through him, but he still functioned in fear and doubt and anxiety. And again, there's many great examples that we can use that let us know, what? We're going to experience those things. As Christians, it's never going to be smooth. God never promised it was going to be easy. But here you have David. I think the pinnacle is, number one, he was an outlier, to come up there, delivering fruit snacks to his brothers,
Fruit snacks. Yeah, he was a supplier.
He was just supplying some stuff, some what we would call morale boosters. That's literally what he was doing. Here's some cheese and fruit snacks, brothers, to make you feel better about being up here, being made fun of. So he shows up, and he hears everything that's going on, and he literally doesn't hesitate. I mean, he starts to take action, and we don't see there's any doubt in David's mind at this point that Goliath is going down. From the moment that he opens his mouth about it until Goliath is on the ground, headless, there was just no doubt. And so David's faith at this point was pretty amazing. And again, there's no recorded instances of God audibly speaking to David. He was literally, his faith was built off of experiential things, those personal experiences with the Lord, with the lion and the bear and all these things, and just this alone time that he had with God, which, by the way, is another great lesson. David spent a lot of time alone with the Lord in prayer, and that relationship built up, and God accomplished some things through him and built up David's confidence. But I really do think that was the pinnacle. Of course, there are other things that David did get done, and maybe even in some ways bigger things. But as far as David as a man or a young man, or even just as a timeline or a space and time of his life, or span of time in his life, I would say that would be the pinnacle because of just the fearlessness and the confidence that he had whenever he approached that. His faith was at a unbelievable level.
Now, I can definitely understand that. Now, on the flip side of that, and you have a few different options to choose from, what do you believe was the worst moment in David's life, and why do you believe that would be considered the worst moment?
Well, I'll get to it in a minute, but the Bible actually tells us that the murder of Uriah was the worst moment in David's life. And I'll tell you about that in just a minute. But basically, yeah, so whenever David murdered Uriah in order to gain access, if you will, moral access to his wife, because, that was just a weakness or a time of weakness for David. A lot of things happened. God punished that so severely. First of all, the child that was conceived through that immoral relationship there was allowed to die, and then a curse was brought on David's family that the sword would never depart from his house. So David's family never recovered from that, and it would be something that would rear its head over and over and over in David's life with his children, where it was constant turmoil. David's heart was broken constantly by events that would happen within his own family with his own kids. And 2 Samuel 12:10 tells us that curse was put on his family, and then when we read what happens after, we see that was true. It's exactly what happened. But yeah, the Bible tells us that this was the worst thing that David ever did, because 1 Kings 15:5 says, "Because David did that which was right in the eyes of the Lord, and turned not aside from anything that he commanded him," talking about the Lord, "all the days of his life, save only in the matter of Uriah the Hittite." So it says, so this is a statement of how much David followed the Lord and how faithful he was, except for in the instance of Uriah the Hittite. And that's the only thing that is mentioned where it says, that this was David's biggest blunder. This was his biggest problem. Now, and it came with the biggest consequence, like I say, where his family never really recovered from it.
No, definitely, and wow. Yeah, and I would wonder as far as, with the murder of Uriah and how the sword wouldn't depart from his family, and how his action not only caused the death of a newborn, but also essentially death of his children as well.
That's true, yeah.
And things like that.
Right.
So, that's, bringing that up. And we're going to circle back to these things here in a moment, but going over to Moses, I want to ask you the same questions with Moses. But first, in Deuteronomy chapter 34, verse number 10, Scripture records that there arose not a prophet since in Israel like unto Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. Now, what do you think that means, whom the Lord knew face to face? We read in the Old Testament in the Bible that no man can see God and live. But yet here we know that Moses knew the Lord face to face. What do you think that means?
Well, I believe from what I studied Moses, that's more of a, I'm not sure what the word that I'm looking for is. So that's more of a statement about his conversational interaction with the Lord and less about him actually seeing his face. But we can elaborate on that a little bit. But something that's interesting is Moses spent more time in the direct presence of the Lord more than any other recorded prophet by far, where he spent direct one-to-one time, whether it be in the tabernacle, whether it be on the mountain. It's Sinai. So there are somewhere between. By the way, I'm just gonna be honest here. I chat GPT just a little bit of this, so I'm gonna let the cat out of the bag. But because I was wondering, like I started trying to compile this information myself, and I was like, man, this is taking too long. So I was like, hey, ChatGPT, hey pal, what do you think about Moses? How many times?
So the Antichrist is helping.
Yeah, he is. But anyway, I was able to GPT was able to give me around 9 instances recorded where Moses met and spoke to the Lord. I'm talking about like person to person, or I mean where the Bible tells us that the presence of the Lord was there. And also think about this. I mean, this sort of slipped by me until I was reading back through, but there was at least one instance where Moses spent 40 days and nights in the presence of God. 40 days. Imagine, I mean, listen, you and I, we've been friends a long time. You know what I mean? We've been friends a long time, but I've never spent 40 days and nights hanging around you, dude.
I don't know if I could do that.
And so, but I'm just saying, think about the type of friend or the type of relationship you have with another person, being, or whatever. 40 days and 40 nights. Even if you're just passing information, the conversation. I would imagine with as much time as Moses spent, conversation probably drifted away from the rules and just went to certain things. I mean, think about Moses, even in the New Testament, how he meant so much to Jesus that he was one of 2 people to be on the Mount of Transfiguration. And, starting to get into some of the deep dive stuff, but we're told, and I don't remember the exact scripture reference, but I can look it up, but where Jesus steps aside to speak secretly to Moses and Elijah very briefly before they leave the mountain. And so Jesus had some literal, they had insider trading, man. I mean, Moses knew what was going on. I mean, Elijah knew what was going on. And so I truly believe whenever we're given that face to face, Moses' relationship with the pre-incarnate Jesus Christ, because by the way, that's who it was. And it makes perfect sense when you look at all the connections there. Even sitting on the mercy seat, which was the lid of the ark. That was Jesus doing that, sitting there talking to Moses in that presence. But anyway, I think it was the amount of time. We also know that Moses is the only one who saw the Lord, who asked, which I think it was funny, because if you read this instance where Moses asked the Lord to see his glory, and that kind of stuff, it's just wild. But it's like that kind of came up in conversation, and Moses asked for it. But yeah, just that relationship.
No, I could definitely see that. Definitely. So, like David's life, what do you think? And again, you have some options. What do you think was the greatest moment in Moses' life? Red Sea, confronting the Pharaoh, different parts of the Exodus wilderness experience. We know that there were some trials and some issues. the earthquake with Korah's rebellion. What do you think was the pinnacle of Moses' life?
Well, I actually just mentioned it. I think that the pinnacle was when Moses got to see the pre-incarnate Jesus Christ walk by him and see his glory. That's my opinion. It doesn't get any more again, we talk about insider trading stuff. You don't get more of a glimpse of what's up than whenever God's like, okay, I'm going to jam you in this crack right here. Don't look at my face, because no man can see my face and live, and I'm going to walk by. You can see the rest of me, but that's it. And I mean, the Lord never showed himself to anyone except for a very, very, very small group. I think even on the Mount of Transfiguration, I don't even think they got to see how much Moses got to see, because they weren't hidden anywhere. They did get to see, Jesus in definitely in a different form than they normally did, but Moses got to see a version of Jesus that was so powerful that he literally had to be hid from it. And to me, I'd be like, this is the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I'd be like, man, this is, Moses probably never got over it. I mean, it would just be phenomenal. But in terms of his faith, definitely just the Exodus, to me, I think, because Moses had to push through some stuff. Like I said, the stage fright, or the anxiety, the rejection, what seemed like failures with his leadership with Israel, because they whined so much and they never appreciated what he did. They really didn't appreciate Moses until after he was gone. After he was gone, then everybody wanted to point to him as the gold standard, but not when he was alive. And definitely when he saw God's glory, I mean, that would be I wouldn't be able to talk about anything else ever.
Yes.
Like every time I had a conversation they'd be like, "Hey, what'd you do today?" I'd be like, "Did I ever tell you about the time I saw God's glory?" Every time.
and to be honest, there's been moments in my life, actually in the last 5 years, where I've specifically prayed, Lord, please show me your glory. Now, I did not have the relationship Moses has with God, and I can't think of another person, like you said, that God revealed himself to that degree than with Moses. And so I can't expect, to have the same experience as Moses at all. But,
right.
I had, asked for that a time or two. But, all right, so what do you think was the worst moment? And there's a reason for these questions.
Sure.
But what do you think was the worst moment in Moses' life? Was it striking the rock? Was it killing the Egyptian? Was it just fleeing? What do you think was the worst time in his life, and why?
Definitely for me is going to be striking the rock and losing entry into the promised land, because that was the point. Like the promised land, entry into the promised land and being there was the whole purpose of that, all of that time in the wilderness, the purpose of the Exodus, the purpose of all of the suffering and the hunger, all of these things. Even though God provided for them and really provided well for them during that time, there was a lot that they had to endure only to have it taken away. And so a lot of people miss this about the striking of the rock, which kind of brings it up. So when Moses lost entry to the promised land, he lost it for misrepresenting the Lord to the people of Israel. When I first read this, I remember as a young man, I read it and I thought, man, Moses did so much for God. Why is he being punished so harshly for this act? And it's because, when Moses went and struck the rock, he misrepresented the Lord. So the Lord, if you read that whole chapter, the whole thing that happens, the Lord wanted to show mercy and benevolence and provision to Israel because they were thirsty and they cried out. Now, Moses was aggravated. He was tired of the whining. He was tired of he'd had enough of all this stuff. But God, at this particular moment, God was trying to show grace and mercy to the people Well, when Moses went out there and in anger he struck the rock, suddenly the people thought God was angry. So then they became afraid, and God got angry because he was like, so this is literally the third commandment. So, whenever the third commandment says, do not take the name of the Lord in vain, everybody thinks it's about swearing and saying God's name. Now, let me be clear. That is not a good thing to do. You don't want to do that. It's bad. But that is not it's not what it means. It is about ambassadorship and not vocabulary. So when you have someone who says they represent the Lord, or in any manner, it could be through being a pastor, it could be through just being out in the public eye, and you trying to give testament for the Lord, or you being God's man, and you misrepresent him in the wrong way, and you make him look bad, that's not good. And in fact, we see that gets punished very harshly in many cases, even in cases like this where Moses was an exceptional leader. Again, the most notable leader. There's no man closer to God than Moses was, and yet the Lord took away the one thing that he was working towards here on earth. Was that, and it was because he misrepresented the Lord. God was trying to show mercy and show provision, and Moses demonstrated anger instead because he was frustrated, and God said, I can't let it go. I cannot let it go. You are me to these people, and I cannot let it go. So I think that was the worst moment, because it was one of those awkward moments where you have God who is, Moses is a friend of God. We're told that. And God says, Moses, I'm sorry, but I got to take this away from you. It was hard. It was a hard time. And Moses, I think, Moses regretted that, obviously, and he lamented that. And it was a tough thing.
Definitely. So we talked about a couple of the great men of the Bible, specifically the Old Testament, the highs and the lows of their life. Now, it begs the question, why do you think the Bible records, we can make argument for the highs, of course, but why do we think the Bible records the lows of these great biblical heroes, and what should it mean for us today when we're studying these lives of great people of the past?
That's a great question. And, for me, it just, from an apologetics point of view, it's just more proof that the Bible's true. The Bible doesn't cover up the failures of some of his greatest leaders. Especially when we're looking at guys like Moses and David, and it's honest. It's honest about the good and the bad. And there, outside of Jesus, there's no perfect men. And the big takeaway here too is if someone like Moses, if you look up who's mentioned the most in the Bible outside of Jesus himself, Moses is pretty high on that list. He is held up as an example even today. He is lauded as one of Israel's greatest leaders, and so if he can make mistakes, and if he messes up and he has struggles, then we know when we have struggles. And what I love about this too is they're not remembered for their mistakes. Now the mistakes are noted, but they're not remembered for that. They're still remembered for being great leaders. And for us, especially, God has a really special place in my heart for other men who want to be leaders in their family and that sort of thing. We have to remember as men that we cannot allow ourselves to be defined by the dumb things that we do sometimes, but to when we do understand and realize our mistakes, we got to do better and not repeat those mistakes, and try to figure out how to serve the Lord, how to serve our wives or serve our family, serve our co-workers or whatever it is in a better way. And, just being honest about our mistakes too. one of the hardest things for me, I remember whenever the kids were little, is having to own it whenever I would completely do something dumb at home and make a call or lose my temper or yell or, be short or be unfair, having to, put away my pride and just go in there to one of my little girls and go, you know what, Dad made a dumb decision. I messed up and I'm sorry, and apologize, just being honest about mistakes. And so, they, in both examples, they ended up overcoming their mistakes and are known for serving the Lord, are known for their heart, are known for their faithfulness. And it's because the Bible reveals these mistakes so that we can see that mistakes are going to be made no matter what, and we can get through them.
I like that because it made me think of the fact that they're not known for their mistakes. They're known really for their character. Mm-hmm. And if we look at David being a man after God's own heart character, and Moses, a man whom the Lord knew face to face, again, I would argue character. So yeah, like you said, apologetic wise, it's a holy book that reveals the shortcomings of the biblical heroes of the faith, but yet realize the fact that everybody makes mistakes. None's perfect. Like you said, Jesus is the only perfect one. And the fact that we're not defined by our mistakes. We're defined by our relationship with God and then our character as well. And I think the book of James says that Abraham was called a friend of God. Mm. And yet Abraham lied twice about Sarah being his wife. And so again, character versus conduct. And I appreciate how you drew that out. So regarding David and Moses' life, that's one of the last questions I have for you. What are some of the principles from everything we talked about, you studying their lives so much? What are some principles you try to pull out and apply in your own life, and what could we apply in our lives today?
That's a great question. So David taught me how fully trusting and obeying the Lord for the main mission is vitally important. But Moses taught me that you can't get there until you spend some time with the Lord first, building that relationship. We can do that through prayer and regularly staying in the Word, reading our Bible. Because David solely relied on the Lord to accomplish these amazing feats, physical feats of strength and ability to conquer and all these things, in places where the Lord had him do it. But David's faith, like I say, just the power of his faith. And then we look at Moses' relationship with the Lord and his commitment and just the time he spent with the Lord one-on-one. Again, those are two great examples to me. You have faith and relationship. And I think those are two key things that I take away from both of these men number one, believing that God can accomplish what he wants through you, using faith to do that, just believing in that, and then understanding that we need to be talking to the Lord. We need to be asking for wisdom, and we need to be asking for direction and praying for, spending time in prayer. I'm telling you, man, prayer is so underrated at times for getting things done. I always told my kids growing up, prayer is how we get God involved in things. And that's another whole discussion. But we could get into free will and the Lord and all that another time. But like prayer does get the Lord involved, and it also grows that relationship, especially something that I like to do with the men's prayer team that we meet here on Tuesdays. By the way, shameless plug for the men's prayer meeting on Tuesday morning, 6 a.m. Be there. But I started keeping an old crusty notebook of the requests, so every time we're there, I write them down physically, old school, not digitally on a phone or anything. And then when we pray about stuff, and we get this feedback from people, hey, here's what happened. I try to write that down back on that old prayer request. And the other day I was just flipping through there and just looking at different things where it's like, oh man, you know, God did this and oh, God did that. It's important because, I mean, we live in a society and a world today where information moves so quickly because of our phones and social media and just the computers and all this. It's so, man, I tell you, I forget stuff that I knew last week. Even yesterday. And it's really easy to forget things that God does for us because, you know, life gets good again and, you know, we start moving on, we forget all about it, and then we don't start remembering those things until here we're back in the valley again. Oh, man, you know, get down on my knees. Let's start asking the Lord to pull us out, you know. Get your winch, Lord. You got to pull me out of this thing. Mm-hmm. Let's get it in four-wheel drive. I got to get out of this hole.
Yep. Even God mentions that in the Old Testament, the fact that, you know, bring you into the land, you know, be careful. That way you don't think by my own hands I have done this, you know. So we definitely have that mindset of going back and, like you said, make a note of answered prayers in the memorial stones when the children of Israel crossed over Jordan. You know, why are these stones here? You know, and so we could tell generations, you know, this is, you know, Lord brought us over on dry land. And so I appreciate you bringing that out. So as we wrap this up, are there any final thoughts you'd like to share before I ask you this one question that everybody's just waiting to hear?
Oh boy. And I thought the cartoon questions might be it, but I see that was you threw me a curveball.
I was actually trying to get you to mention something about SpongeBob, but I forgot about He-Man.
Oh yeah. Well, no. So SpongeBob. Okay. So before we wrap it up, SpongeBob. I got into SpongeBob when Lauren was born. Like, I don't know what that was. Something SpongeBob is something we did together. You know, watch SpongeBob. Seasons 1 through 4 were good. They went off the rails after that, but yeah, learned some good moral lessons. That's funny. I didn't catch that till later. I thought you meant like of all time, like old school, going back to the early days.
Well, that was good though. Still.
Yeah. You know, I want to encourage everybody to take some time and figure out how you can get into the Word. Like, I would say the way I got so interested in some of this deep dive stuff is I really got convicted about reading my Bible. But there was a big problem. It wasn't happening. You know, I wanted it. I wanted to do it. And it just seems so boring. I mean, I'm just going to be honest here. This is a few years ago. It seems so boring. And then I heard somebody, it might have been Pastor Ken, it might have been you, I forget. This is going back, 3-4 years ago. And I'd been reading my Bible before then, but I wasn't consistent. Like I wasn't doing it every day. That said, I learned to start praying that the Lord would make me desire His Word. Like, start praying about, Lord, I want to start getting involved, reading the Word, but help me to want to do that. And I probably prayed that for like 6 months, and it just, for the longest time, I just didn't. And I was like, Lord, I want to read your Word. And no kidding, and this is going to sound crazy, but I just woke up one day and I was like, man, you know what? I'm going to start. I'm going to get up today and I'm going to read as much of Genesis as I can. And so then I did. But then even what got me more into reading is once I started doing that, I remember one day after I first started reading, not long after I first started reading, I was in our guest bedroom and I was looking at an old bookshelf in there, and I saw one of my dad's old Bibles that he left. He left each one of us kids a Bible, and I don't know if that was on purpose or just because he had a lot of Bibles, but anyway. But I took that Bible down and I was looking at it, and he had written a bunch of notes in there, and so I just started reading through some of this stuff, and I was like, oh, there's a little piece of information I didn't realize. I don't remember exactly what it was. And that's when I got the idea to do what I've talked to you about, the Legacy Bible, where I was like, you know what? I want to purposefully purchase a Bible that has a note-taking section in there. And as I read it, I want to write down pieces of information that I either have already learned or now am learning as I'm studying, so that in the future, whether it be one of my children or one of my grandchildren or one of my great-grandchildren, if one of them end up with this Bible, they can read it and be like, oh, man, great-granddad, man, he had this thought, or he's providing granddad provided some context for this scripture that I'm reading, or some admonishment of some kind, or something, just from my thoughts and my perspective and my learning. And so once I started the Legacy Bible, then I was like, well, I can't just leave the thing empty. I need to fill this thing up. So then I started reading it, and I really made a commitment. So every single day, and you see this Bible I got sitting here next to me, and I'm about 4 years in, and I mean, I've just got tons and tons and tons and tons of notes addressing things like how can we talk about homosexuality, or what's the truth about that? What's the truth about things like why does mankind need saving? What is free will all about? What does it mean to be saved? What is free grace? I have all those things where I've written down, like, here's my stand on these things, and here's why I take a stand on these things, because I think this is what the Bible says, because I want them to know doctrine. If they don't learn anything else from being here, if they learn one or two things, it's worth every bit. So anyway, that's a shameless plug for doing a Legacy Bible. I just, I have a heart and a burden for the future generations, because I don't know what they're going to be up against. And I feel like once Christ comes back and takes his bride and the rapture, and we're gone, there's going to be little pieces of things that are left behind, like this book. And even if it's nothing more than this book gets in the hands of someone who realizes what's going on, and someone that God can use to reach people during the tribulation period. Again, this is me thinking. I'm trying to think as many steps ahead as I can. It can be a provided resource or something, And here's the thing: we can't don't think that you can't be an effective tool or be effective by recording things or learning as much as you can, because what you'll find is that there's a lot of ways God can use you. But anyway, to me, the Legacy Bible, if I don't leave any other legacy behind other than this Bible, at least it's something, and I really feel like it's something that the Lord will use. So.
Yeah, and you got me onto that too. So I had bought a specific note-taker's Bible, and I started doing a Legacy Bible myself, specifically writing about personal experiences and how a verse personally spoke to me in a situation. So I know I have that Bible that I'm going to end up leaving inheritance-wise to one of the kids. But then, like this one right here that I typically use, this is really my study Bible. This has a lot of my doctrinal notes, theology, background, stuff like that. And in certain books of the Bible, it's like, lack of better words, littered with pen and ink and markings. And so that's another Bible that's going to be left behind. And so you sort of got me onto that. But I know someone's going to look at this Bible and be like, a crazy man wrote this, because there's like, But I remember the first time I ever made a mark in a Bible. I thought it was like sacrilegious. I was like, in the mark was an asterisk. That was it. I just made a little star by something, and I felt dirty for doing that. But
you dirty man, you wrote in God's word. How dare you?
But I encourage you, like Matt said, have a desire to study the Bible, mark the Bible and things that will help you remember things, and providences of God, blessings of God, just knowledge of God, things of that nature, as well. So, Matt, I thank you for, being here and talking about David Moses, talk about your own life and things you gleaned from it. But I want to ask you one final question that I'm sure, anybody that's listening to this, if you know Matt, you're probably going to ask him, why did he say this? And really, there were maybe some other choices you could have answered it with, Matt. So I'm going to be kind of easy on you, though.
Okay.
All right? I'm going to be kind of easy on you. Right. Do you like music? You like listening to music?
I do.
Do you like sitcoms?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah, nothing. I haven't watched any in a while, but yeah.
No? Okay. So, like in the beginning of this episode, there's like a theme song, not a theme song, but like a little tune and, words or whatever. And then with sitcoms, you have your little theme song. So, right off the, just off spur of the moment, what would be your life's theme song? What would be your life's theme
My
song?
life's
Yes.
theme song. Oh, man. Oh, well, it would be a sea shanty.
A sea shanty.
Let's pull back go back to the SpongeBob thing. I feel like my life would be a sea shanty of some kind. I don't have a specific one in mind, but
there once was a man named Matt Swofford, and he used to go to Open Door.
yeah, exactly. Just like was it the Gilligan's Island theme song? That would be it. That would be the yep. So that would be it. The Gilligan's Island theme song with different lyrics. That's what it would be.
A sea shanty, okay.
Sea shanty, yes.
Well, we're going to have to put together some lyrics for that, and then maybe for Open Door folks here that you can hear Matt's sea shanty song about his life.
Yeah, let's sing about the Wellerman. The
Wellerman.
The Wellerman song. I don't know if you know that one.
That's the only one that I know.
It's the only one that's safe to listen to, so I apologize. I don't drink rum or anything like that, just so that everyone knows, because a lot of the sea shanties talk about sailor stuff, sailor mouth.
Yeah, it does. But I drink tea.
I do. Yeah, well, that's true. Yes, they do drink tea.
The Wellerman. Well, that was good. I was not expecting that, but hey, the Flying Dutchman. So
right,
okay,
right.
I see the parallel.
Yeah. So let me flip that on you. What were you expecting? What
I honestly don't know.
I wanted the tiger. What was that?
Maybe I had no idea, but I was not expecting a sea shanty. But I appreciate you being here. For everybody else tuning in, we'll be on the lookout for other Odd Talks dropping every Monday. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, comment, blah, 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 blah. And we want to see you on the next episode, so thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for tuning in to the latest episode of Odd Talk. If you're looking for a friendly, loving, Bible-believing, dispensational, grace-oriented church that hasn't succumbed to the woke ideology of our day, be sure to visit Open Door Baptist Church either in person or online. Their address and social media links are listed in the description of the episode. See you on the next episode.